Hello friends, welcome back to the vlog. In today's video, we are going to be resetting for November. So we're going to be talking about what we read in October, what we're going to read in November, things we might be looking forward to in November, all that jazz. But before we can get into all the things that we're looking forward to in November, all the things that are on the docket, we have to take a look back at what the hell happened in October. Guys, October was low-key a crazy month for me. I feel like I had a lot of things that went on, and yet I have very little content to show for it. Let me explain. There were so many things that I did in the month of October that I was like, oh, I'm gonna get some cute clips of this or make a vlog out of this or whatever. And then I was in the moment and I was like, I'd rather live in the moment. I'd rather not be looking at this event that I'm at or this thing that I'm at through the lens of a screen. So I have some clips, but not enough for them to make their own video. Not enough to make my own batch of content. So I have some clips from all the things that I did in October, but not enough to make individual videos for those things. And truthfully, it was not cohesive enough that I think it made sense to just do like October vlog. So what I've decided on is I'm going to do a little montage of October in our November reset. So we're saying farewell to the spookiest month of the year, and we're going to do that via all the footage that I created. So without further ado, let's take a look back at the month of October. Here is a fun and fresh video of me working on my fall granny square blanket. Let me tell you something. This blanket took me months, and in October, I finally finished it. If you can see this picture in the corner right here, I crocheted every single square with my own two hands, and then I sewed them all together, hand sewed them all together with my own two hands, and I could not be more proud of this beautiful masterpiece that I was able to finish. I listened to audiobooks while I was working on it. If you ever wonder, Abby, how do you finish so many books in a year? How do you read so many books? The answer is I listen to audiobooks while I'm doing other things. Please take in the beauty that is this blanket, because it is one of my life's biggest accomplishments, and my future nieces and nephews or children or whatever, it will be a family heirloom, okay? It's going to be passed down for as long as possible. It will be a treasured family prize.
We're in Las Vegas, bitches!
Woo!
Guys,
You want chocolate fudge?
they have an Ace of Cakes vending machine.
Crazy.
So Frankie's upset that I've never had a Twinkie before. So I'm gonna have my first Twinkie and we're gonna put it in the vlog, you know. Doesn't taste like anything.
Crazy. It's so good.
Cheers.
Thoughts? How's the espresso?
On the inside,
How's the espresso martini?
dude. Worth every bit of the $25 that it cost. some ghosts.
We're not sipping yet, though.
But we will be.
Heyo friends, we've got some book mail from Book of the Month, so let's unbox it. So, the book that I got this month, first we get a bookmark. I always know my place. Submitted by Mackenzie in Washington. Hey. Always get a new bookmark. And then the book I got this month is The Book of Witching by C.J. Cook. Pause to read the synopsis here. So yeah. So it's been a while since I actually read one of my Book of the Month books. The pile is just growing, just filled with these beautiful hardback books. And I think I've noticed that I have a tendency to pick red-covered books. Looking over at the stack, there are quite a few that have red or just like warm tone colors as the front cover. I wonder what that's about. Wow, wasn't that so fun? Hey, Abby, you did so many things in October, and that was so fun. But I noticed something that you didn't talk about was what did you read in October? Hey, I'm glad you asked me. I'm glad I asked myself. Let's talk about what I read in October. I have my handy dandy reading journal here because I can't remember what I read in October. What did I freaking read this month? So this month, I technically read 7 books. Technically. 3 of those were graphic novel comic books. So maybe those should be like lumped together as like one. You know, like in total, it was like 400 something pages of comic book. So do what you want with that information. We'll talk about the comic books first. I read the first 3 volumes of the Vox Machina Origins comics. Obviously, they were good. The only thing that I can say about them that didn't have me like head over heels, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars about them was just that the art style was a little weird to me personally, especially like watching the animated series and watching the original campaign of Critical Role, and just like all the different ways that I have seen the original characters of Vox Machina be portrayed, I don't think they looked like them. Like especially Vex, Vax, and Keyleth. I think they looked too masculine. I don't know. There's something about the art style in these first 3 comics that I just wasn't like vibing with. But the plot was fun. I actually had like heard some of these stories that take place in the comics because I watched the original campaign, because I watched The Legend of Vox Machina on Amazon Prime, all of that. So a lot of the stories that come up, I'm like, oh, I feel like I've heard this before. And so it was cool to see it like fleshed out in one long sort of story. Critical Role, Vox Machina Origins, Volume 4. I think it's supposed to come out like in its volumized version sometime either this year or next year. Yeah, so I read the first 3 volumes of Vox Machina Origins, and of course they were lovely. Now we're going to talk about the actual like novels that I read this month, which there are 4 of them. The first one being our book club book this month, which was Starling House by Alex E. Haro, and I gave this a 5 out of 5. I thought it was very good. I thought it had such great sort of spooky sort of vibes without being actually scary. There was a little bit of a romance subplot, but essentially it was a gothic fiction about this sort of cursed town, and there's this magical house and spooky starlings, the bird. But yeah, I just had really good like vibes. In fact, we're going to come back to talking about Starling House later on in this video because it inspired 5 stars for Starling House. The next book I read was one of the Bridgerton books. It's In His Kiss, which is Hyacinth's story. And I gave this just like a clean 4 stars. I liked it. It was fine. It was had like a mystery / like solving a puzzle sort of vibe to it, which I thought was an interesting mix-up from all the other Bridgerton books. But it was just like, okay. And I listened to this one on audiobook, and so a lot of the details escape me. This is something that happens when I listen to audiobooks. I miss a lot of the details. So that's something that has happened reading this book. Yeah, Hyacinth gets together with the male that is introduced, Gareth, and that's kind of the plot. I'm excited to almost be done with the Bridgerton books. I hopefully will read Gregory's book and then this month, and we'll be done with the Bridgerton books. Hey, 4 stars. The next book that I read was Casket Case by Lauren Evans. And the premise is essentially there is this girl whose family dies and she has to move back home to a small town in Alabama. Shout out my people. And she is running a casket store. And so her entire life is surrounded by death. And then she meets this guy named Garrett, who is sort of a logistic coordinator for death. And they get together. And it's very much like a rom-com. There are absolutely no stakes at all involved. And it was just kind of like a instant attraction situation where they were like instantly in love with each other, but then are like she's just trying to decide if she wants to be with him, basically, throughout the entire 381 pages of the book. And so that was a little underwhelming for me. I liked the book. I finished it. I thought it was fine, but it was like sort of like just okay. So with my compile rating, I gave it a 4 stars. However, I have been going back through all of the books that I read this year and adjusting their star ratings because I felt like I feel like I've given out way too many like 4 and 5 stars this year. And that was because I was sticking to like whole numbers. If I was closer to a 4 star, I would give it a 4. If it was closer to a 5, I would round up and give it a 5. All this, that, and the other. I went back and I did by like a 4th scale, so like 3.75, things like that. So I truly am giving Casket Case like a 3.75. I enjoyed it, but nothing happened. There's a lot of themes about like accepting death and all that kind of stuff, which I think is interesting and fun and fresh. So, it was a fun thing to read during Halloween. And then the last book that I read this month is The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. And I gave this 3 stars. And here's the thing. I liked the plot of this book. I liked the premise of this book. In practice, I did a combination of audiobook and ebook. And in practice, I was just ready for it to be over. Like the premise that our main character, Vivi, curses her ex-boyfriend, Reese, for being a crappy boyfriend. And then he comes back and all hell breaks loose. That's a funny premise. And I was hipping with that. There is far too much sexual tension in this book. Far too much. It was jarring, especially when I was listening to it. It was just like not the vibe. For as like funny and goofy as the premises and as like the characters were, way too much. And then there wasn't payoff at the end. It was just way too horny. Without being explicitly spicy. Does that make sense? So those are the books that I read this month. I would recommend any of the books that I read. Would I ever reread any of these? Aside from the comics, I would probably reread the comics. I would probably not reread any of the rest of these. Okay, now let's talk about what's on the horizon. What's on the path for us for November? And I only have a few, if I'm being honest. And that is because I have found that I am not reading the books that I put on my TBRs. And that is annoying me. And also, when I look at the list of books that are on my TBR, it stresses me out because I'm like, oh, I have to read one of these books that I told the world I was going to read, and then I don't want to read them. And so I'm going to try to be chiller. You know, I like everyone, have like my Goodreads want to read thing, my Fable TBR, folder. And so I can always like go back and look at that as my ever-growing TBR. But generally speaking, I'm gonna kind of stop being so strict with myself about like, oh, you can't read books that aren't on this list, because that's kind of what I had been doing. So I just have a few books that are on like my radar, I should say. I'm not gonna call it my TBR, I'm gonna call it my radar. The first one being a book I've already started, Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. And this is a book that I have to read. I've read some of it. I have to finish reading it probably today. I will probably finish reading it today because it's a Sunday when I'm presently filming this. On Wednesday, November the 6th, I am going to a meet and greet with Lila Sage to promote her book that's coming out, Lost and Lassoed. And so I have to read her first book before then. As we know, I've read Swift and Saddles, and I loved it. And I'm liking this one so far. I just haven't finished it. And I'm sure I'll love Lost and Lassoed. So I'll probably read Lost and Lassoed after I get it from her on Wednesday. So that's another book we can add to the TBR. But we're going to finish up Done and Dusted before I go and see her. So if you don't know, Done and Dusted is a small town Western romance about Emmy and Brooks, and he is her older brother's best friend, and so she is very off limits for him, and there's all this tension, and she comes back to the small town, and all this, that, and the other, and there's all this tension, and that's just how we like it. And then Lost and Lassoed will be about the older brother and Emmy's best friend. I'm pretty sure that is the coupling that is happening for Lost and Lassoed. So I think that that's very funny. And then Swift and Saddled was about the middle child and a completely other random girl. And if that's not middle child vibes, I don't know what is. The next book on my radar is a book that has been on my radar for a million billion years. And I just keep asking myself, why haven't I read this book yet? And I think it's just because it's a brick. It's dense. I am intimidated by it. But my partner read it and loved it. And so now I'm like, what is holding me back? That's Babel, guys. Babel by R.F. Kuang. I want to read it so bad. I have started reading it several times. I also have it on my Kindle, but I've started reading it several times and then just like put it down. And I keep asking myself, why the heck are you doing that? Because you know you're going to love this book. And yet here I am, putting it off and putting it off. But after reading Starling House, I'm just like really in the vibe of sort of like dark academia, like gothic adjacent sort of vibes. And that's this. And funnily enough, I'm pretty sure Frankie got me this physical copy of this book for my birthday last year. And it's almost my birthday this year, and I haven't read it. So maybe I'll be able to be like, oh, it didn't take me a year to read this book, which my birthday is on November 23rd. So get into it, Sagittarius Queen. Speaking of gothic books, I really have been itching to reread Wuthering Heights by Miss Bronte. This is one of my favorite books that I read in high school. And if you took a flip through of my copy of this book, it is the most heavily annotated book I have ever had. In fact, I've gone back and looked at my ACOTAR books. I've gone back and looked at some other like classics I've read, and no book has like as many things. Can you see this? Like, can you see? It's in pencil, but like I have so many things underlined and so many notes. I have like literally like printouts of like supplemental materials printed out and stuck into the book. And I just have been so inclined to reread this, especially after reading Starling House, which I mentioned we'd call back to it. After reading Starling House, I just kept thinking about Wuthering Heights. I kept thinking about how much I wanted to reread it. And so I probably will. I was just rereading a quote on the back. May you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then. What? This is such a good book, dog. I like low-key want someone to rewrite Wuthering Heights, but in like more modern English and see what the vibes are. But dude, like the amount of times, look at this. Look at all of these notes. This looks like some people's like Bibles. I'm just looking at some of my, oh, he drunk is one of my annotations. Like, I'm pretty sure my teacher, it was like, these are the themes that we're going to be looking for while reading Wuthering Heights. So if you ever see those things, like underline and highlight those sort of things. And boy, did I do it. Like the amount of times I've written dramatic irony or pathetic fallacy is... And then there's sometimes I just like underline stuff. I'm like, what was that for? Where I have no notes in it. I'd rather be hugged by a snake. How the devil can you dream of fawning on me? I detest you. Classic Heathcliff and Catherine. Yeah, I totally just like flipping through this. I'm like, I want to stop reading Done and Dusted right now so that I can start reading Wuthering Heights. So hopefully I'll finish Done and Dusted today so then I can get on her. I mean, like, like I want a new copy so I can, here's the thing, pause, time out on talking about my TBR. I want a new copy of Wuthering Heights that I can annotate from my like adult POV, not from my like, I was like, we were like sitting here like reading this in class, like paragraph by paragraph, some of the time. Sometimes it was like, oh, read 30 pages tonight and blah, blah, blah. But then there were other times where we like sat and like really went through like every individual little like line in the book, which was so fun. I wish I want a class where I can do that now, like as an adult. But I want to reread it with like no annotations to see what I would annotate now as an adult. But then also because this is my favorite piece of classic literature, I also want like a pretty version. I want like a fancy version, but I don't love a lot of the like, I don't like the Penguin Random House. I don't like the Barnes and Noble like exclusive. Maybe I need to get on Etsy and get like a custom, like really like fitting the theme of the book. If anyone has any links to any like really good versions of Wuthering Heights, let me know. I want one. Next up, I don't know if I'm gonna actually reread this. I just bought this copy and so now it's making me think I want to reread it, but it's just really not the vibes. So I got this copy of Beach Read. I couldn't help myself. It is literally, turn this down. It is literally so gorgeous. The dust jacket is so gorgeous, but also get into it. The version without the dust jacket is so cute. And then it has these beautiful like sprayed edges, right? Get into it. Isn't it gorge? Now I read Beach Read in the spring of this year, and it is one of my favorite Emily Henry books. I also love Funny Story and Book Lovers, but gosh, this is just such a gorgeous copy. And so I'm almost like, I just bought this. So should I reread it or should I leave it like pristine and beautiful and never touch it? That's a great question. But I thought I just like had to show this to you because gosh, it is so beautiful. Also on the TBR for November, which I can knock these out so fast, but it's all of the rest of the Critical Role comics. And so everything that I'm holding right here well, all of these are the Mighty Nine origin comics. And then I also have the Tales of Exandria, the Bright Queen. And I want to finish reading all of these. I've had these for probably 2 years and haven't read them. So I've just like been collecting them as they've been coming out from the Critical Role cast. And so I really just want to like finish reading all of them. And so that I can start dipping into the Critical Role novels, you know, Kith and Kin or Nine Eyes of Lucian. What Doesn't Break are the 3 big ones. So gotta get into those as well. So maybe I'll knock all of those out sometime this month. And then the last thing that's on my radar is I desperately want to finish the Throne of Glass books. It's been months since I read Queen of Shadows, which is a 6-star book for me. I've just been intimidated by the whole tandem read thing, but then I recently had a friend who just finished the tandem read, and it took her only like a couple days. And granted, she has a lot more free time than I do, but it is sort of lit a fire under me. I'm like, it's fall. Fall is so Throne of Glass is so fall coded. So I think that I can knock it out. I have to. I need to. I must. So those are all the books that are kind of like on my radar. I'm not going to call it my TBR. I'm not going to lock myself into that, because if I go and I look at this little piece of paper that is sitting right in front of me that has my October TBR on it, and I see that I technically only read 3 of the books that were on my October TBR, that is so annoying. And so I'm not going to lock myself into that for November.